There comes a point when you realize your life has become strangely crowded, not with people, but with their opinions. You catch yourself choosing your words more carefully than your values, questioning decisions that once felt right, replaying ordinary moments long after they have passed. A brief glance from someone else unsettles your confidence, while a few words of praise seem enough to restore it. Little by little, your peace stops belonging to you and begins depending on reactions you were never meant to control. The Stoics understood this long before the modern world existed. They believed that the moment your inner calm is governed by external approval, you quietly surrender the only freedom that truly belongs to you. Marcus Aurelius often reminded himself that the soul takes the shape of what it constantly dwells upon. If it dwells on approval, it becomes dependent. If it dwells on comparison, it becomes restless. But when it returns to what lies within its own control, it becomes remarkably difficult to shake. Stoicism was never about escaping the world or pretending other people do not exist. It was about reclaiming the only place where lasting peace can ever be found, the discipline of your own mind and the strength of your own character. Most people spend years believing they are searching for confidence, when in reality they are searching for permission. Permission to speak honestly, to live differently, to stop measuring themselves against expectations they never consciously chose. Yet the freedom they seek has never been waiting in the approval of the crowd. It has always been waiting in the quiet moment they decide to trust their own character more than the changing opinions of the world. Most people move through life with the comforting belief that every important decision they make comes from their own independent mind. It feels reassuring to think that the direction of your life is entirely your own, that your goals reflect your deepest values, and that your daily choices are guided by careful thought rather than outside influence. Yet the moment you slow down long enough to examine those choices honestly, something surprising begins to emerge. You notice how often your decisions have been quietly shaped by expectations you never consciously accepted. The career that appeared respectable was also the one that earned admiration. The opinions you expressed were often the ones least likely to invite criticism. Even the version of yourself that others know may have been assembled piece by piece from countless attempts to fit into places where acceptance felt safer than authenticity. None of this happens because people are weak or dishonest. It happens because the desire to belong is woven deeply into human nature, and unless we become aware of it, we slowly mistake adaptation for identity. The Stoic philosophers understood this long before the modern world multiplied the number of voices competing for our attention. They observed that human suffering often begins not with external hardship, but with misplaced dependence. Our judgments, intentions, and choices remain within our influence. Reputation, praise, status, and the opinions of others never have. The problem arises when these two categories become confused. Little by little, without recognizing the shift, we begin investing more emotional energy in what belongs to the world than in what belongs to ourselves. Our peace becomes tied to reactions we cannot predict, and our confidence begins rising and falling according to circumstances that were never ours to command. This rarely happens through one dramatic decision. It grows quietly through ordinary moments that appear too small to matter. You hesitate before expressing an honest opinion because disagreement feels uncomfortable. You soften part of your personality because experience has taught you that certain qualities receive warmer responses than others. You choose the safer path instead of the meaningful one because security promises immediate approval while uncertainty risks disappointment. None of these moments seem significant on their own. They even appear reasonable, but over months and years they accumulate until something subtle changes inside you. Carl Jung believed there comes a quiet turning point in psychological life when a person grows tired of always orienting themselves outward, not tired because they have failed, but because they have spent too long measuring themselves against the world. That exhaustion is often the first sign that something deeper is asking for attention. Instead of asking whether a choice reflects your own principles, you begin asking whether it will be accepted. The shift is almost invisible, yet its consequences reach every part of life. Every decision invited praise from some and condemnation from others. If he had built his peace upon those reactions, his inner life would have been in permanent turmoil. Instead, he returned again and again to a simple discipline: judge your actions by whether they are just, honest, and consistent with reason, not by whether they satisfy every observer. That lesson remains remarkably relevant because the world has only become louder. Every opinion now arrives instantly. Every achievement is measured publicly. Every mistake seems permanent. Under those conditions, it becomes increasingly tempting to substitute public approval for private conviction. The difficulty is that approval produces a powerful emotional reward. The mind quickly learns to associate recognition with safety. A compliment provides relief. Positive feedback creates certainty. Being accepted by others temporarily quiets the persistent voice of self-doubt. There is nothing unusual about this response. Modern psychology explains that human beings naturally seek social acceptance because for much of history, belonging increased the chances of survival. The brain still carries those ancient patterns, even though the dangers have changed. Today, rejection is rarely life-threatening, yet the nervous system often reacts as though it were. This is why criticism can feel disproportionately painful and why praise becomes so intoxicating. Neither changes who you are, yet both can influence how you feel about yourself if left unexamined. Over time, this creates a subtle dependency. Confidence no longer grows from character, but from confirmation. You begin needing evidence from outside yourself before trusting what you already know within. Success feels real only after someone notices it. Good work seems valuable only after receiving recognition. Even moments of happiness become incomplete unless they can be validated by someone else. At first, this dependence feels harmless because it arrives disguised as motivation. You tell yourself that external encouragement simply helps you perform better. Yet there is an important difference between appreciating encouragement and requiring it. One strengthens effort, while the other quietly transfers authority over your emotional life into hands that cannot consistently protect it. The Stoics challenged this pattern by asking a remarkably simple question: what part of your peace have you entrusted to circumstances beyond your control? The answer is rarely comfortable because it reveals how much invisible power we have given away. Every time your mood depends entirely on another person's approval, you have allowed them to influence something that belongs only to you. Every time your sense of worth rises with applause and falls with silence, your inner stability becomes vulnerable to forces that constantly change. No one intends for this to happen. It develops naturally whenever awareness is absent. The solution is not to reject people or ignore relationships, but to place them in their proper position. Appreciation can enrich life without becoming the foundation upon which life stands. This realization often marks the beginning of genuine freedom because it shifts your attention away from controlling the world and back toward governing yourself. The opinions surrounding you may never become consistent. Expectations will continue changing. Some people will misunderstand your intentions no matter how carefully you explain them. Others will admire qualities you never intended to display. None of that needs to determine the direction of your life. Carl Jung observed that the moment we begin measuring our worth through the eyes of others, we surrender one of the deepest anchors of our psychological life. Not because other people are always wrong, but because we quietly hand them the authority to define who we are. The moment you stop borrowing certainty from strangers, something quieter begins to emerge. Your choices become less reactive. Your values become clearer. Your mind gradually returns to the place where lasting confidence has always been waiting, not in the unpredictable approval of others, but in the steady practice of living according to principles you can respect even when no one else is watching. That realization is rarely comfortable because it leads to a question that most people spend years avoiding. If so much of your life has been shaped by expectations, habits, and silent compromises, then who has really been making your choices? The answer is not always another person. More often, it is the version of yourself that slowly learned how to earn acceptance. It speaks carefully, behaves appropriately, avoids unnecessary risks, and constantly measures whether it is fitting into the world around it. At first, this seems like maturity. It feels responsible and practical. But over time, something begins to feel strangely distant. You accomplish what you thought you wanted, yet the satisfaction never lasts. You become the person everyone expects, while quietly wondering why fulfillment always seems just beyond reach. That quiet unease is often the first sign that the life being lived is no longer fully your own. These roles matter because they carry responsibilities, but they are never meant to define the person performing them. They are expressions of life, not its foundation. Wisdom begins when you recognize that your character exists before every title and remains after every title disappears. The difficulty is that society rarely encourages this distinction. From an early age, people are praised for what they achieve, how they appear, and how well they meet expectations. Gradually, identity becomes tied to performance rather than principle. Without noticing it, the role becomes more important than the person behind it. If these reflections are helping you see yourself a little more clearly, consider subscribing. Not because every answer can be found here, but because wisdom is rarely discovered all at once. It is built through steady reflection, honest examination, and the quiet decision to keep returning to what truly matters. This process unfolds so naturally that almost nobody questions it. As children, we quickly learn which behaviors earn approval and which invite criticism. We discover that being agreeable often receives more encouragement than being honest, that confidence is admired while uncertainty is quietly hidden, and that success attracts attention in ways character often does not. None of these lessons are taught directly. They are absorbed through thousands of ordinary interactions. Slowly, the mind begins making small adjustments. Certain opinions remain unspoken, certain emotions stay hidden, certain dreams are abandoned before they are fully understood because they seem unlikely to fit the image that has already been created. Every adjustment feels insignificant on its own, yet together they build a personality carefully designed for acceptance rather than authenticity. There is nothing inherently wrong with adapting to the world. The Stoics never suggested abandoning courtesy or rejecting social responsibility. There is an important difference between behaving appropriately and becoming dependent upon appearing acceptable. One reflects wisdom, the other quietly replaces it. When every action is filtered through the question of how it will be received, inner guidance gradually grows silent beneath the weight of external expectations. This is where many people begin living from what feels like a mask without ever recognizing that one exists. The mask is not necessarily false. It often contains real qualities. Kindness is genuine. Professionalism is genuine. Confidence may even be genuine. The problem is not that these qualities are dishonest. The problem is that they become incomplete when they exist only because they receive approval. Eventually, the effort required to maintain that carefully constructed image becomes exhausting. Every conversation demands attention. Every mistake feels dangerous. Every unfamiliar situation threatens to expose something imperfect beneath the surface. The mind becomes occupied with preservation instead of growth. Energy that could have been spent understanding yourself is redirected toward protecting an identity that constantly requires maintenance. Perhaps the greatest tragedy is not that people wear masks from time to time. Every society requires certain forms of restraint and cooperation. Carl Jung believed this social mask was not a flaw, but a necessary part of life. He called it the persona, the face we present to the world so we can belong, cooperate, and fulfill our roles. The danger begins when we forget it is only a role and start believing it is who we truly are. The deeper tragedy appears when someone forgets there is anything beneath the mask at all. Years pass. Success arrives. Responsibilities increase. Others describe them as accomplished, reliable, and admirable. Yet in quiet moments, when no performance is required, an unfamiliar emptiness begins to appear. It is difficult to explain because nothing seems obviously wrong. Life looks successful from the outside. Relationships continue. Work progresses. The routine remains intact. Still, there is a lingering sense that something essential has been misplaced somewhere along the journey. Not lost forever, but buried beneath years of becoming what seemed necessary instead of discovering what was true. Modern psychology offers an interesting perspective on this experience. Researchers often speak about the difference between intrinsic and extrinsic motivation. One grows from personal meaning, the other depends upon external rewards and recognition. Although both influence behavior, they create very different emotional lives. When actions arise primarily from external validation, satisfaction fades quickly because another reward is always required to replace the last one. The cycle never truly ends. The Stoics reached a similar conclusion centuries earlier, though they described it in different language. They believed that lasting stability can only emerge when action is guided by reason and character rather than by applause or reputation. External rewards may come and go, but they cannot provide a foundation sturdy enough to support the entire weight of identity. This understanding changes the way you look at your own life. Instead of asking whether others approve, you begin asking quieter questions. Which parts of my life genuinely reflect my values? Which habits belong to me, and which belong to fear? These reflections are not invitations to reject society or withdraw from relationships. They are invitations to return responsibility to its proper place. The goal is not to become someone entirely different overnight. It is simply to become more honest with yourself than you have been before. That honesty often feels uncomfortable because it removes familiar illusions, yet it also creates space for something far more durable than approval. When the image you have worked so hard to maintain eventually begins to crack, whether through failure, criticism, or unexpected change, you discover what truly supports your life. If everything depended upon appearances, the collapse feels devastating. But if your foundation rests upon character rather than reputation, something remarkable happens. The image may weaken, circumstances may change, and opinions may shift. Yet the person beneath them remains standing. That quiet realization marks the beginning of genuine strength, because from that point forward, you are no longer protecting a performance. You are simply becoming the person you were beneath it all along. Perhaps this is why comparison carries such a quiet weight. The pain rarely comes from another person's success itself. It comes from the subtle belief that their progress somehow exposes your lack of it. Without realizing it, you stop seeing another life as simply different and begin treating it as the standard by which your own life should be measured. The mind starts making silent calculations. They have accomplished this by now. They have reached that milestone already. They seem more confident, more successful, more admired. Before long, your attention drifts away from your own direction and settles on a race you never consciously agreed to enter. Carl Jung believed this is the moment a person begins denying their own individual path. Every life, he argued, unfolds according to its own rhythm of growth, and the moment you measure your journey against someone else's, you quietly abandon the process of becoming who only you can become. The Stoics warned that the mind easily becomes disturbed when it judges itself according to things that were never meant to belong to it. Comparison is one of the clearest examples of that mistake because it convinces you that peace lies somewhere ahead, waiting at the finish line of someone else's journey rather than within your own. Every individual, he believed, is shaped by a unique combination of nature, experience, opportunity, hardship, and responsibility. No two lives unfold under the same conditions. One person is called to lead. Another is called to build quietly. Someone else spends years enduring difficulties that no outsider could ever recognize. To compare these lives as though they were identical is to ignore everything that made them different from the beginning. The Stoic perspective is remarkably simple. Your task is not to live another person's destiny more successfully than they do. Your task is to fulfill your own with honesty and discipline, regardless of whether anyone else notices. The challenge is that the modern world rarely encourages this way of thinking. Everywhere you look, there is another standard waiting to measure you. Social media presents carefully selected moments that appear complete while hiding the uncertainty that produced them. Professional achievements become public milestones. Personal relationships become symbols of success. Even inner growth is often turned into something that can be displayed and compared. The result is a constant invitation to evaluate yourself against lives that exist only in fragments. You are comparing your private struggles to someone else's public victories. Naturally, the comparison feels unfair, yet the mind continues making it because repetition gradually turns distortion into habit. What makes this habit so exhausting is not simply the act of looking outward. It is what happens immediately afterward. Once comparison begins, contentment quietly disappears. Whatever you have accomplished starts feeling smaller because someone else appears to have accomplished more. Gratitude becomes difficult because attention shifts toward absence instead of abundance. Even meaningful progress loses its emotional impact because the goalposts keep moving. There is always another person earning more, achieving faster, traveling farther, or receiving greater recognition. If your sense of fulfillment depends upon surpassing everyone around you, fulfillment remains permanently out of reach. The horizon continues retreating no matter how quickly you move toward it. Consider two travelers walking separate mountain paths. One climbs steadily, appreciating each step while remaining focused on the trail beneath their feet. The other spends the entire journey looking sideways, wondering whether someone on another mountain has climbed higher or faster. Both expend energy, both move forward. Yet only one experiences the journey itself. The other lives almost entirely inside comparison. Eventually, exhaustion arrives, not because the climb was too difficult, but because attention was divided between two paths instead of one. Life often unfolds the same way. Energy follows attention, and wherever attention constantly wanders, peace quietly leaves behind. Carl Jung saw this pattern long before modern psychology began studying social comparison. He believed that the moment we abandon our own path in favor of someone else's, we begin living against the natural rhythm of our own development. The outer world remains exactly as it was. Your relationships remain the same. Your abilities remain the same. Your opportunities remain the same. Only perception changes. The mind begins filtering reality through deficiency rather than possibility. Achievements that once felt meaningful suddenly appear insignificant simply because they now exist beside someone else's accomplishments. Nothing about your life has objectively become worse. Only the lens through which you interpret it has changed. This is precisely why Stoicism places such emphasis on governing perception before attempting to govern circumstances. There is another consequence that often goes unnoticed. Comparison gradually disconnects you from your natural rhythm. Every meaningful pursuit requires seasons. There are times for learning, times for struggle, times for visible progress, and times when nothing seems to happen at all. These quieter periods often produce the deepest transformation because they strengthen qualities that cannot be measured externally. Patience develops in uncertainty. Resilience develops during setbacks. Wisdom develops through reflection rather than applause. Yet comparison makes these seasons feel like failure because they do not resemble someone else's visible success. Instead of trusting your own pace, you begin forcing growth according to timelines that were never designed for your life. The Stoics consistently returned to a simple discipline whenever the mind drifted toward distraction. Bring attention back to what belongs to you. Your effort belongs to you. Your character belongs to you. Your judgments belong to you. Another person's achievements never have. This is not an invitation to stop admiring excellence or learning from those who inspire you. Admiration becomes healthy when it encourages growth without replacing self-respect. You can appreciate another person's strengths while remaining firmly rooted in your own direction. There is no conflict between those two realities unless comparison transforms inspiration into competition. As this understanding settles more deeply, something unexpected begins to happen. The pressure to keep pace slowly loses its influence. You stop measuring every chapter of your life against someone else's timeline and begin paying closer attention to the person you are becoming through your own experiences. Progress feels quieter, but it also feels more genuine. Each step regains its meaning because it belongs to your journey rather than to a race created by the expectations of others. And in that quiet shift of attention, the road beneath your feet finally becomes visible again, allowing you to move forward with steadiness instead of constant comparison. Once comparison begins to fade, something even more subtle often takes its place. The race with other people may no longer consume your thoughts, yet a quiet sense of being watched remains. It appears in ordinary moments that should feel completely peaceful. You replay conversations after they have ended, searching for mistakes no one else noticed. You remember a brief pause in someone else's response and quietly interpret it as disapproval. A simple expression on another person's face suddenly feels loaded with meaning, even though nothing was actually said. It is as if an invisible audience follows you everywhere, quietly evaluating every word, every decision, and every flaw. The strange part is that this audience rarely exists outside your own mind. The Stoics understood that many of the burdens people carry are not created by reality itself, but by the judgments they attach to it. Long before modern psychology explored cognitive distortions and negative self-talk, they recognized that the mind often invents threats far more powerful than those the world presents. Someone fails to return a message quickly, and the mind quietly fills the silence with imagined rejection. A colleague seems distracted during a conversation, and suddenly doubt begins whispering that your ideas were foolish. A stranger offers a neutral expression, and before long your thoughts have transformed it into silent criticism. Reality offered very little information. The mind supplied the rest. Once those interpretations take hold, they begin shaping emotions as though they were unquestionable facts. This is why the fear of judgment can survive even after comparison begins losing its influence. You may no longer envy another person's success, yet you still worry about how you appear in their eyes. Every interaction becomes another opportunity for the mind to search for evidence that you are somehow falling short. Carl Jung believed this was not a contradiction, but the beginning of a deeper psychological struggle. He observed that we often project our own hidden self-judgments onto the people around us, imagining criticism that originates less in their minds than in our own. The remarkable thing is that most people are far too occupied with their own concerns to evaluate you nearly as often as you imagine. They carry their own worries, insecurities, responsibilities, and distractions. While you are replaying a conversation from yesterday, they have already moved on to something entirely different. The invisible audience that feels so real is often nothing more than your own attention turned inward in the harshest possible way. The world may speak, praise, criticize, misunderstand, or remain silent altogether. None of those responses automatically define you. They become powerful only when your own mind grants them authority. The Stoic discipline was never about silencing the world. It was about refusing to surrender the government of your inner life to voices beyond your control. Modern psychology describes something remarkably similar through the idea of cognitive schemas. Each person develops deeply rooted beliefs about themselves, often formed through years of repeated experiences. Someone who quietly believes they are inadequate begins interpreting ordinary situations through that belief. Neutral feedback sounds negative. Honest advice feels like rejection. Silence becomes evidence of failure. The mind does not simply observe reality. It filters reality according to expectations that already exist beneath conscious awareness. This explains why two people can experience the exact same situation while reaching completely different emotional conclusions. One sees opportunity, the other sees criticism. The difference lies less in the event itself than in the lens through which it is interpreted. The Stoics encouraged a practice that remains surprisingly effective today. Instead of immediately believing every emotional reaction, pause long enough to examine the judgment beneath it. Ask yourself whether the conclusion you reached is supported by facts or merely by fear. This is not an invitation to deny emotions or pretend they do not exist. Emotions deserve attention because they reveal something important about your inner life. What they do not deserve is automatic authority over your understanding of reality. Between the event and your response exists a small space where reason can quietly intervene. It is within that space that genuine freedom begins to grow. Many people spend years attempting to change how others see them without ever questioning how they see themselves. They work harder, speak more carefully, achieve more, and seek greater approval, hoping that external validation will finally silence the inner critic. Yet the critic rarely disappears because it was never being fed by the opinions of others alone. It was being sustained by a private belief that remained unchallenged. No amount of praise can permanently satisfy a mind already convinced it is unworthy. Compliments may provide temporary relief, but relief quickly fades when the underlying judgment remains untouched. This is why some of the most admired people still struggle with deep insecurity, while others remain remarkably peaceful despite receiving very little recognition. Real change begins when attention turns inward with honesty instead of accusation. Carl Jung believed that the moment we stop searching for the source of our suffering in everyone else, we begin reclaiming parts of ourselves that have long remained unseen. Rather than asking whether other people approve, you begin asking why their approval carries such emotional weight. Instead of assuming every uncomfortable feeling reflects external reality, you become curious about the beliefs quietly shaping those feelings. This requires courage because it breaks the familiar habit of blaming the outside world for every disturbance. Jung saw this as the beginning of withdrawing projection, no longer asking others to carry the judgments that truly belong to our own inner life. Yet it also returns something far more valuable: responsibility. Once you recognize that your interpretations influence your suffering, you also recognize your ability to reshape those interpretations through patience, reflection, and disciplined thought. As this perspective quietly settles into your daily life, the invisible audience gradually begins to disappear. Conversations end without endless analysis. Silence loses its threatening meaning. Small mistakes become opportunities to learn rather than evidence of personal failure. Most importantly, the harshest observer slowly transforms into a wiser companion. Instead of demanding perfection, your own mind begins encouraging honesty, patience, and steady growth. That quiet transformation marks one of the deepest forms of freedom because the approval you spent so many years searching for in the world gradually begins to emerge from the only place where it could ever truly endure, within your own well-governed mind. A quiet mind learns the difference between observation and reaction. Instead of chasing every impulse, it begins watching them pass with patience. That small shift changes everything because it interrupts habits that once operated automatically. This does not mean every moment alone becomes peaceful. Some days reflection exposes painful truths. You may recognize habits that no longer serve you or beliefs that quietly limited your life for years. The Stoics never promised that self-examination would always feel comfortable. They believed discomfort often accompanies growth because clarity requires letting go of comforting illusions. Yet they also believed that facing those truths willingly is far less painful than spending a lifetime avoiding them. Temporary discomfort creates lasting freedom. Constant avoidance creates lasting dependence. One path demands courage for a season, the other demands exhaustion indefinitely. As your relationship with yourself becomes stronger, discipline begins to take on an entirely different meaning. For many years, it may have been tied to pressure, achievement, and the constant need to prove that you were capable enough, productive enough, or worthy enough. It often felt like a struggle against yourself, fueled by deadlines, expectations, and the fear of falling behind. Yet something quietly changes once your attention is no longer consumed by comparison or the pursuit of approval. Discipline stops feeling like punishment. It becomes an expression of clarity. You no longer act because you are afraid of being judged if you fail. You act because your choices have become aligned with the kind of person you genuinely wish to become. The effort remains, but the emotional weight begins to disappear. What once required constant force now grows from quiet conviction. If yesterday had been filled with distraction, today could be different. If emotion had clouded judgment before, there was always another opportunity to choose wisdom instead. This perspective removes much of the pressure people place upon themselves. Discipline is no longer measured by flawless performance. It is measured by the willingness to return to what is right, even after making mistakes. Consistency becomes more valuable than intensity, because lasting character is never built through occasional bursts of effort alone. Modern culture often celebrates visible discipline. People admire dramatic transformations, impressive routines, public achievements, and extraordinary levels of productivity. While there is nothing wrong with accomplishment, this version of discipline can quietly become another performance if it exists primarily to be seen. The Stoics offered a different picture altogether. They believed that the most important victories usually happen where no audience exists. They happen in private moments when no praise is waiting, choosing patience instead of anger during an ordinary inconvenience, remaining honest when dishonesty would be easier, finishing a responsibility even though nobody would notice if you stopped. These moments rarely attract attention, yet they gradually shape a life from the inside outward. Character grows quietly because its roots develop long before its results become visible. Think about a tree standing through every season. People notice its branches, its height, and the shade it provides, but almost nobody thinks about its roots. Those unseen roots determine whether the tree survives strong winds, harsh winters, and long periods without rain. Discipline works much the same way. The habits repeated in private become the roots supporting everything that eventually appears in public. A person who patiently strengthens their character each day rarely needs to convince others of their strength because their actions naturally reveal it over time. The opposite is equally true. Someone who spends all their energy creating the appearance of discipline often discovers there is very little beneath the surface when life becomes difficult. This is one reason motivation alone can never sustain meaningful growth. Motivation is emotional. It rises and falls according to circumstances, mood, and external encouragement. Some mornings it feels abundant. Other days it seems completely absent. If your actions depend entirely upon feeling inspired, progress becomes unpredictable. This does not mean ignoring emotions or becoming cold. It means recognizing that emotions make unreliable leaders. They deserve acknowledgement, but they should not always determine direction. A disciplined life grows from decisions guided by principles rather than temporary feelings. An interesting shift also takes place in the way success is measured. Earlier in life, success may have depended almost entirely on visible outcomes. Recognition, promotions, accomplishments, and approval seemed like reliable evidence that progress was being made. As your perspective matures, another question gradually becomes more important. Did I remain faithful to my principles today? That question changes everything because it returns responsibility to something entirely within your influence. Some days your efforts will produce remarkable results. Other days, circumstances will prevent success despite your best intentions. The Stoics insisted that neither situation should determine your peace. What remains fully yours is the quality of your effort, the honesty of your intentions, and the consistency of your character. Perhaps this is the deepest form of discipline the Stoics hoped to cultivate, not the discipline of endless striving, but the discipline of inner harmony. Carl Jung believed there comes a profound turning point when a person stops being pulled outward by the world and begins building a disciplined inner life. It is no longer driven by recognition or the need to prove oneself, but by an inner necessity to live in alignment with what is true. A life where actions reflect values so consistently that there is little conflict between what you believe and what you do. In that state, the need for external recognition naturally begins to fade. The opinions of others still exist, but they no longer govern your direction. The audience that once seemed so important quietly disappears, leaving only the steady guidance of your own conscience. And when that inner voice becomes clear enough to trust, you discover that it has been the wisest companion beside you all along. Eventually, something almost imperceptible begins to change. It does not arrive with dramatic breakthroughs or sudden revelations. Instead, it unfolds quietly, like the first light of morning gradually replacing the darkness without asking for attention. The opinions that once determined your mood begin losing their grip. A compliment still feels kind, but it no longer becomes the foundation of your confidence. Criticism still deserves consideration, but it no longer has the power to dismantle your sense of self. Success brings gratitude rather than superiority, while failure becomes information instead of a final judgment. The circumstances surrounding your life may look remarkably similar to what they were before, yet your experience of those circumstances becomes entirely different. The Stoics regarded this as one of the clearest signs of genuine maturity. Peace is no longer borrowed from the outside world because it has finally found a place to rest within your own character. This transformation often surprises people because it does not require the world to become more supportive or more understanding. Friends still have opinions. Strangers still misunderstand you. Difficult days still arrive without warning. Unexpected setbacks continue to appear, just as they always have. The difference is not found in changing the behavior of others. The difference is found in changing the relationship you have with everything beyond your control. Every disturbance begins with an event, but it grows through the interpretation you attach to that event. Once that understanding becomes part of your daily life, emotional stability stops feeling like an impossible goal and begins feeling like a skill that can be patiently developed. One of the most beautiful consequences of this change is the quiet freedom it creates in relationships. When your worth no longer depends upon constant approval, you stop asking other people to carry responsibilities that never belong to them. You no longer expect every conversation to confirm your value or every interaction to strengthen your confidence. This makes relationships lighter, healthier, and more genuine because they are no longer burdened by hidden demands. Appreciation replaces dependence. Gratitude replaces desperation. You can enjoy encouragement without requiring it for survival. You can listen to criticism without immediately becoming defensive. You begin seeing people as fellow travelers rather than judges assigned to evaluate your existence. That subtle shift transforms not only the way you experience others, but also the way they experience you. As this way of living becomes more familiar, success itself begins to take on a different meaning. Earlier in life, success may have meant proving something to the world. It may have been measured by achievements, titles, admiration, or visible accomplishments. Those things can certainly be valuable, but they gradually lose their position as the ultimate measure of a meaningful life. Another standard quietly replaces them. Did I act with integrity today? Did I remain patient when frustration tempted me otherwise? Did I choose honesty even when convenience suggested another path? These questions rarely appear on public scoreboards, yet they reveal far more about the quality of a life than any external achievement ever could. Carl Jung believed that genuine psychological maturity begins when a person's sense of worth no longer depends on constant confirmation from the outside. The Stoics arrived at the same truth through a different path. Victories over circumstance are temporary. Victories over character shape every moment that follows. Failure also begins to lose its frightening reputation. It no longer appears as evidence that you are inadequate or permanently behind everyone else. Instead, it becomes part of the education every meaningful life requires. Each mistake reveals something previously unseen. Each setback exposes weaknesses that success often hides. Seneca observed that difficulties are not sent to destroy character, but to strengthen it, much like resistance strengthens a muscle. Without challenge, courage remains theoretical. Without disappointment, patience rarely develops. Without uncertainty, wisdom struggles to mature. Seen through this perspective, obstacles stop appearing as interruptions to the journey and begin revealing themselves as part of the journey itself. The very experiences once feared become opportunities to deepen qualities that comfort alone could never produce. Perhaps this is why the Stoics spoke so often about returning to yourself, not because the self is perfect, but because it is the only place where genuine responsibility can exist. You cannot govern another person's opinions. You cannot command the future. You cannot erase uncertainty from life. What remains entirely within your care is the quality of your own judgments, your own actions, and your own character. Every day offers another opportunity to strengthen those things. Every ordinary moment becomes another chance to practice steadiness instead of impulse, honesty instead of appearance, and purpose instead of distraction. The transformation is gradual, almost invisible, yet it quietly reshapes the entire direction of a life. In the end, focusing on yourself was never an invitation to withdraw from humanity or to become indifferent to the people around you. It was an invitation to stop abandoning yourself in the pursuit of their approval. It was about reclaiming the one place where lasting freedom has always been possible. The world will continue changing. Opinions will continue shifting. Praise and criticism will come and go like changing weather. Yet a life rooted in character stands through those seasons with quiet confidence, not because it controls everything that happens, but because it has learned to govern the one thing that always mattered most. Your own mind becomes a place of order instead of conflict. Your conscience becomes a steadier guide than public opinion, and your peace no longer depends upon being seen by everyone else. It depends upon remaining true to the person you choose to become. One thoughtful decision at a time. There is one attachment that often remains even after comparison has quieted. The need for approval has weakened, and the fear of judgment no longer dominates every decision. It is far less obvious than the others, which is why it can remain hidden for so long. It is the desire to control outcomes. At first glance, this hardly seems like a problem. Careful planning is wise. Hard work is admirable. Preparing for the future is part of living responsibly. The Stoics never argued against any of these things. In fact, they believed that thoughtful preparation reflected reason and good judgment. The difficulty begins when preparation quietly transforms into expectation, and expectation slowly hardens into demand. Somewhere along the way, effort is no longer enough. The mind begins insisting that life unfold according to its preferred script. When reality refuses to cooperate, frustration appears, not because you failed to act well, but because you believed your effort guaranteed a particular result. This distinction became one of the foundations of Stoic philosophy. Epictetus constantly reminded his students that there is an enormous difference between governing your actions and governing their consequences. Your effort belongs to you. Your intentions belong to you. The honesty with which you approach your responsibilities belongs to you. The final outcome never fully does. Countless variables exist beyond your reach. Other people's decisions, unexpected circumstances, changes in health, shifts in opportunity, even simple chance all play their part. Yet the mind often behaves as though enough determination should overcome every uncertainty. When reality inevitably proves otherwise, disappointment feels personal. It seems as though life has violated an agreement that never actually existed. Think about how often your peace depends upon an imagined future. You tell yourself that everything will finally settle once you receive the promotion, complete the project, build the business, repair the relationship, or achieve the goal that has occupied your thoughts for months or even years. Until then, your mind remains suspended somewhere ahead of the present moment. It keeps negotiating with tomorrow instead of fully inhabiting today. Carl Jung observed that much of our psychological energy is quietly invested in what we hope the future will finally give us: recognition, certainty, or the feeling that we have become enough. Yet even when one desired outcome arrives, satisfaction rarely lasts for long before attaching itself to another expectation. The cycle quietly repeats because the mind has learned to postpone peace until conditions become perfect. Perfection, however, has a way of moving further away each time it seems within reach. The Stoics responded differently. They did not ask life to remove uncertainty. They asked themselves to become steady within uncertainty. That distinction changes everything. Imagine an experienced sailor crossing a restless sea. The sailor cannot command the wind, calm the waves, or guarantee favorable weather. Attempting to do so would be foolish. What remains within reach is learning how to adjust the sails, read the conditions, and navigate wisely regardless of what the sea decides to offer. Life follows a remarkably similar pattern. You are responsible for preparing your vessel, not for controlling the ocean. The more energy spent arguing with conditions beyond your influence, the less remains for responding skillfully to the conditions that actually exist. There is a remarkable calm that appears once this truth begins settling into daily life. You continue setting meaningful goals because purpose still matters. You continue working diligently because effort remains valuable. You continue planning carefully because wisdom encourages preparation rather than carelessness. Yet beneath all those actions lies a quieter attitude. You stop demanding guarantees from a world that has never offered them. Each day becomes less about forcing reality to obey your wishes and more about meeting reality with intelligence and composure. Ironically, this often improves performance because energy previously consumed by anxiety becomes available for clear thinking and focused action. When attachment to specific outcomes begins fading, another unexpected freedom emerges. You become more willing to take worthwhile risks because failure no longer threatens your identity. You become more resilient during setbacks because disappointment is no longer confused with defeat. You appreciate success without clinging to it because you understand it cannot remain forever. Every experience becomes part of your education rather than a verdict on your worth. Life continues offering victories and losses, moments of progress and moments of uncertainty, but they no longer determine the quality of your inner life. This changes the way you see your relationships. You continue caring about people, but care is no longer confused with dependence. You listen more carefully because you are no longer busy protecting an image. You become more patient because disagreement no longer feels like a threat to your identity. You offer kindness without secretly expecting constant appreciation in return. Compassion becomes easier because your emotional energy is no longer consumed by endless concern over how you appear. Ironically, the less desperately you seek approval, the more authentic your relationships become. There is no hidden negotiation taking place beneath your conversations. You are no longer asking others to confirm your value every time they speak with you. Instead, you meet them as another human being, carrying struggles, hopes, and fears of their own. That simple shift creates a freedom both you and the people around you can quietly feel. It was never designed to produce self-centered individuals who ignored everyone else. It was designed to cultivate people whose inner lives were stable enough to serve others without becoming controlled by them. A person who depends upon constant praise eventually becomes unreliable because their actions change with every opinion they receive. A person guided by principle remains steady regardless of whether recognition appears. That steadiness becomes a gift, not only to themselves, but also to everyone whose life they touch. Modern psychology often speaks about coherence, the feeling that your thoughts, values, and actions belong together rather than pulling in opposite directions. When these parts become aligned, emotional resilience naturally increases. The Stoics understood this reality through lived experience long before it was described in scientific language. They believed inner conflict arises whenever actions repeatedly contradict reason and conscience. Peace returns when those divisions begin disappearing. There is remarkable strength in living a life where your private choices resemble your public ones, where integrity does not depend upon observation, and where your values remain consistent whether anyone notices or not. Such a life rarely appears dramatic from the outside, yet it possesses a quiet confidence that cannot be manufactured through appearances alone. One unexpected consequence of this way of living is that meaning slowly changes its source. Earlier in life, meaning may have depended upon reaching visible milestones or receiving recognition from others. Accomplishment certainly has its place, but it gradually loses its role as the primary measure of fulfillment. Instead, meaning begins emerging from the way you meet ordinary moments. A difficult conversation handled with patience becomes meaningful. A promise kept despite inconvenience becomes meaningful. Choosing honesty when deception would have been easier becomes meaningful. These moments rarely attract public attention, yet together they shape the kind of life that remains deeply satisfying long after applause fades. The greatest achievements are often invisible because they happen within the character before they ever appear in the world. There will still be uncertainty. There will still be seasons when progress feels slow, when circumstances become difficult, and when the future refuses to reveal itself. The Stoics never promised protection from those realities because they understood that uncertainty belongs to life itself. What changes is your response. Instead of asking life to become easier before allowing yourself to feel peaceful, you carry that peace into whatever circumstances appear. Instead of demanding certainty before taking the next step, you act according to wisdom with whatever information is available. This quiet confidence also changes your relationship with time. The urgency to constantly prove yourself begins fading because you no longer believe your worth depends upon keeping pace with anyone else. There is room to learn without embarrassment, to fail without despair, and to improve without impatience. Growth becomes less about reaching an imagined finish line and more about becoming slightly wiser than you were yesterday. Every experience, whether joyful or painful, becomes another opportunity to refine your character rather than another test of your value. The journey itself begins carrying the fulfillment you once believed existed only at its destination. Perhaps this is why the Stoic path has remained meaningful across centuries. It does not ask you to become someone entirely different. It asks you to return to the person hidden beneath fear, comparison, distraction, and endless striving. It invites you to stand firmly within your own principles while continuing to participate fully in the lives of others. The world remains unpredictable, opinions continue changing, and circumstances never stop evolving, yet none of those things possess the authority they once held. Your life begins growing from a stronger foundation, one that exists within your own choices rather than within the approval of the crowd. That quiet transformation is not the conclusion of the journey. It is the moment real living begins. because from that point forward, you are no longer chasing a meaningful life from the outside. You are creating one from within, one thoughtful decision after another. If these reflections stayed with you, don't let them end here. Real change never happens because of a single idea. It happens when one quiet decision is repeated until it becomes part of your character. Every moment you choose reason over impulse, peace over approval, and integrity over appearance, you take another step toward the kind of freedom the Stoics believed no one can ever take from you. One of the videos on your screen right now continues this journey even deeper. If you're ready to strengthen your mind, master your emotions, and build a life that is guided from within rather than pulled by the world around you, watch that next. Thank you for being a part of Stoic Journal. Until next time, take care and keep walking the path of wisdom.